Well, welcome to Watercolor Studio 42. I got a nice calendar in the mail. I get quite a few calendars. I think most everybody does that come in the mail. This is one from the Natural Nature Conservation Society, and it's a beautiful calendar. This particular picture that I'm working from today is a photograph that was taken at what they call Crater Lake National Park. This is up in Oregon, way up in Oregon, the western part of the country. And so the picture, I guess somewhere out there is sort of a crater, and then there's probably a lake, but it's kind of misty or clouded over a bit. But what makes it interesting is that I think it's the color and the kind of the softness of the snow and so forth on the fir trees. So that's what I'm going to try to capture. Now, I always tell people that when you find a picture that you think is easy to do, and there are easier things to do, of course, but sometimes to make things look easy is not as easy. And we find that out a lot of times. Sometimes if you take something that's kind of busy, you can always kind of abbreviate it and cut back a little bit. But if it's already easy, then you have to go with what you have to work with. So we'll see what we can do. It's like I said, it's a beautiful picture. And there's several other good pictures in this particular calendar. So what I do is I save the calendars, and I can't always donate to everything, but at least I appreciate them sending things out, and I certainly appreciate the beauty of nature. Okay, so we'll get started. Now, this has a very soft sky, so I'm just going to wet the paper. Just wetting it with just relatively clean water. And you wet just about the whole paper, I think, and that would be okay. Sometimes it dries up a little bit before you get to a particular part of it, but we'll see what we can do. Now, for the most part, I always start lighter. I start with a lighter color, and then we can always build darker shades into that. And this particular color, it has a little bit of pink to it, and it has a little bit of orange. And when we get down into this lower area, it's kind of like a Payne's grayish color. You could say it's sort of a little bit on the sort of dull violet side, but mostly a grayish color. Okay, so now I've got the paper wet here. I'm going to wet down all the way through here. There's some snow in the foreground. I don't spend a lot of time on the drawing itself. This doesn't have as much drawing in it, but there's quite a bit of texture of the snow that would be on the fir trees. So we'll see what we can do with it. Again, I'm going to start off with a yellow color. Mix some yellow in here, put a little bit of orange in that, and then I'm going to add probably some quinacridone rose, and see what I have. I'm probably going to have to kind of thin this out a little bit. See what I can come up with to match that color. Let's see. I think I need to go, I don't know, a little bit more orange, maybe. We'll see what this looks like. So anyways, I'm going to drop this little wash in here. And it's wet in the wet. It's going to be wet. The whole paper's wet. That's so I don't, because in the photographs, there's no real clouds. It looks like just a sort of a haze. And so that's what we have up in this upper part. Now, actually, it has a little bit more pink to it. So I'm just going to see if I can sneak some more pinkish color into that. It's a very beautiful color. It's kind of hard to match it that close, but we'll give it a try. Okay. Now, I like to let the paper kind of do its own thing, but sometimes, you know, you might have the board kind of flat, so what happens is the water settles in. So what I do is put something under the paper or under the board, so that the water and the paint kind of gravitates down towards the bottom area. Now let's see. I'm looking at the picture. I think it needs just a pinch. I'm going to take a little bit of my ultramarine blue. I'm going to mix it over in here and see if I can get this a little bit of a darker shade up in that area. And I know I'm going to have to go darker down towards the bottom here, in here. But I want that to be nice and soft. I don't want to see any brush marks if I can help it. Okay, let's see how that is. Now, before this can settle in and dry too much, what I do is I come in with a paper towel and just very softly blot this where I see a lighter area, right up in this portion of the picture, the photograph. I'm going to put this over here. Probably notice it a little bit better. But right through here, I'm just going to soften that down. Now this is forming a little bit of a puddle here, so we don't need that. I'm just going to kind of brush that back up into here. The board tilts a little bit, so everything colors gravitate. So I just want to get that soft effect. It's almost impossible sometimes to get the same exact effect that the camera photograph can do. But you try to pick that up. I notice now I kind of need a little bit more blue into this, a little bit more purple maybe, and that would help quite a bit. Okay, see what we can do with that. So I use a little bit of I don't use any of my phthalo because that has green in it, but I use my other blue that I have, which is ultramarine, and that has some red to it. So let's see what I can do. I just want to drop some purple in here, but I want to spread it out. I want to spread it around over towards this side, just nice and soft, barely touching the paper with the brush. And I'm just going to water that down, get some more color into that. All right. I usually start with a bigger brush if I can. Now this is going to have a little bit more, deeper color here. Down here in the foreground it's sort of snow, but that has sort of a purplish color to it. I'll mix a little bit of that more up into here. And I want to save, obviously I want to save some of the white down towards the bottom. This can be a lot darker in here. Just go across here. Okay. Now, when you're working on a picture, a lot of times you're trying to get some sort of information out of the picture, but sometimes you have to kind of settle for what the effects are that you're getting on the paper that you're trying to put the color to. Sometimes it comes out better than others. There you are, being extra cautious here. All right, a little bit more up in that corner. You see how I'm trying to get that softness of the sky. Come down through here a little bit more. There is some lighter areas in there. There are some areas there. So I'm still wet into wet here with the paint. But what I can do is kind of blot and pick up some of that. See how I can take some of that color out where it seems to be lighter. A little bit more in here. Get that little speck off of there. I don't need that. Okay. Come around in here. Now this is a photograph, and of course it's the crater lake. The way the pictures here, you don't see too much of a crater, and you don't see much of a lake. We'll have to pretend it's off there in the mist, or in the clouds, I guess. So, we'll come around the corner here. Let's get some of this in, take some of that out. Now, a lot of times what I do, I pick up some of the water off the paper too, using the brush. That's why I'm forever patting the brush onto a piece of towel. I want to go a little bit brighter up in here, this corner. I mean, as far as the effects go, I think the hardest part of trying to do the picture is trying to get that match some of the texture of the color. It's almost kind of impossible. You could take 5 or 6, 10 people or whatever and work on the same subject and say, okay, now try to match that color. And you get all sorts of different shades no matter what. Yeah. There you go, in there. What I'm trying to do is get it softer. There's almost a hint of blue in there too, coming through. I don't know if I want to hit that with a little bit of blue. Let's see. I don't know how that's going to work. Just a kind of a little bit of blue coming through there. Oops, there you go. Not much. Got to erase it a bit. Now, what's interesting about watercolor is that, in a way, when you talk about erasing something, you think of erasing pencil mark, but actually what you're doing here is erasing some of the color, or you could say you're blotting it out. Either way, you're kind of getting it a little bit lighter. Pick up some of that over here. I just want to smooth that out. Okay. Kind of getting a lot like the picture, but this is going to be much darker eventually down in here. What I have to do, though, is get this area where I'm going to put some of the trees in. I want to see if I can lift some of the color out of there and get this to dry a little faster. Yeah. Kind of family of trees. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 6. Wait a minute. Yeah, about 7 in there. Okay. Let's pull some of that out where the trees are going to go. Just so it will dry faster. Now, you could talk about different ways of approaching things. There's different types of little techniques that you can try, using different types of material. I'm using paper towel as far as that. I'm blotting. I'm using the brush to pick up some of and push around the color. Excuse me. Okay, now what I'm going to do, I've kind of messed up that piece of towel, so I'm going to drop that. Take a fresh piece of paper here. Dry some of this out through here. Okay. Where the trees are going to go anyways, somewhat. So I guess what we're saying here is this is a form of preparation. Now I'm still going to let that dry a little bit, so while I'm letting that dry, I'm going to do some of this foreground. Now this definitely has purple to it. A lot of purple there. So let's mix a little bit of that purple up in here. Maybe have just a pinch of some red in it. And let's see if I can get some of this effect in here. This is going to be kind of down in here. A little bit darker color. I'm doing this, and I usually go about doing this when I paint anyways, if it's an outdoor picture. I spend some time doing the top, the sky. I do the bottom, the foreground. It's right through here, kind of loops around, nice little loop in there. Comes around, and then over here, up on the side, I think I'll go up, let's see, where are we? I usually put some marks so I know where halfway is vertically, up and down, and horizontally. So I can work within that. I don't want to split the paper into even quarters, but just gives me an idea what to do. This comes around in here. It's sort of a solid color. I can come back in, and again, I can use a paper towel. And if I want some of this to be softer here, I just lift out some of the color. Because it's supposed to be snow, but sometimes what they do is they put a filter on the camera. So you see all that color. Probably in reality you wouldn't see that as much, but see what we can do. I don't know if that's going to be dry enough yet to kind of put some background color, excuse me, background color in here or not. What I do is I kind of put a vertical line where the trunk would be, and then I just work some shades of color off of that, because that isn't, nothing is like white the way snow is. And so what they've done probably, they put a filter on the camera. So when I paint this in, I got to try to paint in what they were trying to get the effects with the filter of the color. Let's put some of this in here, see what happens. Just a sort of a shading, as sort of a suggestion. There's another isolated tree off in there somewhere. And again, I'm going to build up the color, working in through here. And, you know, this is one of these paintings that you could probably sit down and do 100 of them, and they'd all come out just a little bit different. And then you'd have to say, oh, which one do I want to save? Which ones came out better than the other guy or picture? Okay, now through here. Just these little shadowy washes in through here. Just gives you an idea of where the trees are going to go. All right, take some of that out. Erase a little bit in here. It's sort of like almost like a ghost image, you know, sort of transparent image, and you kind of have to build up to it. You know, a little bit of blue in there. I don't know if I want that. It's not in the picture, but nevertheless, we'll put some in there, see how it works. I think the picture itself lacks a little bit of real strong colors. It's very soft. Okay, let's kind of spread that out a little bit. There's another isolated tree here, kind of over here by itself, right about in there. Just a small one. Okay. You can bring that right down to the line. Now, I'm doing this, everything's going to be hopefully just quite a bit darker when I put the shading in. Okay. Kind of exaggerate some of the edges. Now, a lot of times when you're working from a photograph or even outside painting reality, real life stuff, you have to deviate a little bit. And it's not going to be exactly the same. And I tell everybody, really, when you're an artist, you're not trying to be a camera and capture something exactly like it is, but you're using the picture kind of as maybe a little bit of a reference to what you might be wanting to do. See how that's kind of dark in there? Maybe we don't want that to be that dark. So what I do is I take and lift a little bit of that out. I kind of like the shape of it, so I like the shape of that better than the photograph, because the photograph is kind of making the branches look very, very droopy, almost like a weeping willow tree here. Everything's drooping down. So I'm just going to leave that in the way it is, leave it a little bit darker at the tip. Now there's going to be places that I'll come in, and I'm going to kind of hop, skip, and jump around through here a little bit. And if I like the effect that I'm getting, I won't tamper with it. I won't try to change it too much. Got to make sure this is dry enough. I use the back of my hand to test it. Sometimes your fingers may have a little bit of oil on them. So this is going to be kind of pulled down through here and kind of thin through there. I don't want it exactly that dark. Let's just take some of that paint out of there. A little bit kind of shaggy edges. And like I was saying, I hope that what I do is going to be a little bit more colorful than probably the photograph. Although the photograph can get away with being very subtle, the colors being what they are. But sometimes you can't always get away with that with a painting, because you do still want the painting to carry a little bit. See how I'm coming down there, painting? I know where the center is, so I'm working these brush strokes off center. This side is a little bit flat, so I'm just going to leave that the way it is. And this looks like something else is pushing out of here, right down through there. Looks like another something in the back of that. And coming down through there, and I'm using ultramarine blue, and what I've got a little bit of up here, working that. Oh boy, that's really picking up some purple in there. You probably don't notice it as much on television, but I can pick it up a little bit. It's got some purple in it now from up here. So what I'm doing is actually giving this thing a little bit more than probably what it has in the photograph of it. Okay, now, if this gets a little bit flat, I can always take the brush and pull the brush while the paper's wet, see it? And I can lighten it up and bring back some of the texture. Come down here. It's very droopy. I'm looking at this one. A very droopy type of shape. And I guess if I had some snow and ice on my arms, I guess I'd get kind of droopy myself with all this weight on me. But that's what happens out there in nature. So sometimes the weight of all the snow, it's on the branches for a while, and they never quite bounce back, especially the longer limbs, you know. They kind of stay that way. The only thing that you see maybe that would jump back is maybe some of the other branches that are very short near the top. But other than that, okay, I'm definitely not getting the same effect as the photograph. But if it looks okay, I kind of leave it. But I'll have to come back into it and kind of put a little bit more texture and outline into the shapes. Give it a little bit more contrast there. I'm just working on one at a time because if I work on something else, this is going to get probably too dry and I can't get the effect I'm looking for. If it dries out, I have to re-moisten the paper. I know this has a lot of white in it, but I'm just going to kind of fade it out for now. Okay. 1, 2, let's do this taller one here. This goes way up into there. Okay. And again, I'm going to give it hopefully somewhat of a point, more so than probably what the photograph is. If I bring that up, and just pull this back down, pull this out here. Okay. All right. Maybe I can speed up my process here a little bit more. It's a little bit, quite a bit of texture through here. It's sort of a finer texture down through this area here. See? All right. I was trying to see if there was some green in there. Of course, probably there would be. Okay. It gets kind of fuzzy, so I'm going to pinch some of that out of there. Kind of clean it up a little bit. Okay, down through here, fuzzy. Take some of the fuzzy out. Okay. I'm going to probably come back in when it gets drier. I'll sharpen it up a bit. But I'm certainly not going to have time to do all that fuzzy texture that you see in the photograph. But I will try to give some sort of an effect to what I'm doing. Hopefully they'll still look like some trees, I guess, huh? I hope. Let's see. You can come back up into this sometimes. Now, this has got to be a little bit shorter, and then there's another one close to it. And then there's a little bit of something out in here. This one's further away, so you hardly see any texture at all. You just see the outline sort of something like that as a tree back there. Let's work on these two here. Now, of course, if you want to show the effective distance, you can do that by putting one tree in front of the other, overlapping, whatever. But also, it has less texture. It becomes more of a, you see the contour of it, the outline, but you don't have to get too fussy with it. Let's make that a little bit taller there. There you go. And more of a point. Well, I can't get the point. Okay. A little bit. I don't want to get it too out of whack here. Okay, come down here. I fill that in around through here. And I got to pick up that curve through here. Fill that in. Okay, I'm getting there, sort of that, trying to get loosened up. Sometimes it takes a little while to loosen up. I painted a little bit this morning in my class. A little bit. Maybe a hint of something in there. Like I mentioned, if it's further away, you don't hardly notice as much texture to it. I want to get this nice and smooth here. See if I can clean that up. Pull it back out, or inside. There you go. Get that effect. That one came out nice. I like that off there. I like the little tips on them, like that. You know, see how I hit it in places. Okay. I'm using the photograph kind of as a reference, but you notice that I'm kind of taking off a little bit on my own with the picture. This is kind of becoming part of what I'd like it to look like. So, what else? Oh, a little bit of a indenture there in the snowbank. Maybe I can put some of that in. Just a little bit. It comes in like this. Cuts in, cuts back out. Yeah, fill that in. Get the effect I'm looking for. Maybe a little deeper back here. Yeah, bring that out. Yeah, I gotta do something else with that. Show some of the top edge there. Pull that back down. Okay. Again, it's going to look a little bit different. This needs a little bit more oomph in it, some contrast, and you can get an idea maybe what I'm trying to do. See, this is wet in the wet, so it's still not making hard edges. I can lift some of that water out of there, but I think I just want to fill that in more. I like the edge right here. That's clean cut. Pull it back out. It's snow, soft edge, snow, and loop that up around into here. I don't want a double edge. Erase some of that, take that out. You have to catch it before it can dry too much. Okay, around here, come around here. Nice little swing to it. Swings up into here. Gonna push that back up into there, pull it out. Okay, it's a little bit still flat. Now this is kind of interesting because it comes up around here, and I kind of like just doing this. Let's pull this across here. And it has a couple little bumps. Put some bumps in there. Here's some bumps in there. See if I can take that and smooth that out. Yeah, pull it back into here. Pull this bump a little bit more of a shape to it. And just swing back down and through here, just kind of soften that out. See how it has a soft little curve here. That's why I painted down here. I put some color in here earlier. So it's not like really the white of the paper. Okay. Now, to bring some of all of this out a bit more, I'm going to clean this up before it dries too much. Just push that out of there. Erase it. Take some of that out. This is a little bit different than the photograph. Okay. Take that out of there. Kind of nice little line through here. This is all right. Yeah. Okay, now we got to do something a little bit more contrast in here. This is a sort of a dark area. You can see it in the photograph where it's darker in there. So what I'm going to do, see if I can take some of my Payne's gray. I don't want to use black, but something darker. I think I still want to leave some blue into that. And we'll see what happens. Right, this is going to be kind of out there, away from the stone. So I'm going to try to capture that, pull that back out, and loop around here, and see if I can make that softer. This is supposed to be soft in through here. And I'm just going to kind of blend this back out into there somewhat the way it is in the photograph. Go right up near the tree, into the tree with that. So I don't know if that's going to be, see how that's a hard line. So in the picture it's very soft. So it's got to be blended out way up into here. Okay, see if I can get this a little darker around that tree and in back of it. Come down the sides like this. Maybe cut into that one a little bit more. And back up. And that's just going to kind of do a fadeaway. Hopefully. It's supposed to be soft. See how that's a hard edge? In through here is soft. So what I got to do is just pull this out until it disappears. It just goes into here. And sometimes you have to go way out to get rid of that. To make that edge soft again, you have to go way back up into here until it really disappears. You can sort of dry the brush and just push the water around a little bit. Take the edge away. This is what I meant by, some of the pictures that you do sometimes, they look easy, but they're still tricky, They're still a little bit tricky. You still have to kind of catch it once in a while to just pick up some of that extra water. Bring back some of the light, contrast here, if we can. See how the tree got fuzzy up there, right in there? I lost my little edge on that, but I guess let it dry. Maybe I can put that back in. You can't, if you try to correct something while the paper's still wet, That's very frustrating. You really have to let it dry before you can control the brush stroke. Here we go. I have to take some of that out. Erase a lot of this up and through here. Now you see how that's kind of, in the picture it's very sharp, but mine, I just washed it out. And I think probably what I have to do, I'd like to see it a little bit sharper over here coming back in. It doesn't have to be as sharp as that, but it certainly, you don't want it to disappear like that. Off into space or something. So we'll see if we can work on that. Let it dry. Because if I keep trying to come back in here, trying to clean something up, it's not gonna work as well. So while we're letting that set up, why don't we come back into here? Hopefully this is drier. A little speck in there. Yeah. Now we can cut into this and try to get some of that dry brush effect. I don't know if I can do something with this. See what I can do. Okay, now I'm going to take my little credit card, and I don't know if I can push and pull a little bit with that credit card and see if I can put some texture in there. Not a lot, but see if I can push some paint around. Not really, no. Not getting exactly what I'm looking for. See, I'm trying to get some of that texture of the brows in there. Some of the brows back in. You don't have to do the whole tree that way, but just give it a little bit of texture. And kind of clean it up a little bit. As it dries, you can work this paint a little bit more. Control it a little bit more. You get a little bit of texture there, but you don't want to make it look too awkward, I guess. Do some texture in there. You can pull some of that paint out too. Just push it out. Some texture. And I think what's happening here is that right now it's kind of a little bit too wet. And this one, we'll do a little bit of texture with that. I will just let that set, see if I come back to that, touch it up a little bit more. And let that go for a couple of seconds or so. Let's see if we can drop some color into this one. Make it a little bit darker. Okay, just a little bit in here. Kind of work that out. And see if I can get some texture back into here. What you're doing is kind of pushing the water, the paint around. Just push and pull it a little bit. And if you get too much water on there, sometimes it doesn't look good. you try to be too fussy, sometimes it doesn't come out as good. Kind of let it do its thing, I guess, a little bit more. Okay. We're getting texture like you're not expecting. Give that a little bit more down through here. A little bit more color, darker. So I don't know if we're getting the texture that we're looking for. I think maybe sometimes I like something that's less of, quite a bit less of. But you can always paint some of that out if you want. Pull that out of there. Okay. That's interesting, a little bit. And, you know, a lot of times, you know, when these things dry out overnight, you look at it tomorrow morning and say, you know, that's not bad. It didn't come out as bad as I thought it would be. Sometimes what I do, I don't have any with me. I should have brought some with me. Is I use some white acrylic paint, and I'll purposely let this dry, and then put some white into it. And that kind of perks it up a little bit more. What I'm trying to do now, I may be trying to put too much texture into a paper that's too wet, so everything's kind of getting a little bit fuzzy. And too much is too much. Take some of the paint off my brush here. And just pull that down. Kind of chop it up a little bit, but not much. A little bit on this one over here. All right, a little bit of texture. Now, of course, it's wet in the wet, so you're not going to get any real hard edges. This is a little bit better than it was. Pull that out in here. A little bit more down through here. Pull it back up. Take some of the double edge away. Okay. Now this still needs to be a lot darker through here around the base of the tree. So I don't know if it's dry enough. That's the problem. Sometimes you come back in and it's not quite as dry as it should be yet. Pull something out like that. Let's see. Let's just try, see if we can go a little bit darker across the bottom without getting into too much trouble here. Pull that up from here, up into here, right across the bottom. I like it soft right in through here. That came out pretty good. That's the beauty of watercolor. You know, some of these things, they happen while you're working on something else. This looks halfway decent, you know, and you didn't even touch it. It's better off sometimes to let it do its thing. A little bit of wiggling around. You can see how I'm kind of building up. But if I don't want this to be too fuzzy on this one, I've got to make sure it's dry enough. Maybe I can use a smaller brush and just hit that just a little bit more. A little bit fuzzy. I liked it the way it was before. I'm going to pull that up and add a little bit to it. Do the same thing with this one. Pull it out. There you go. Just a little bit more contrast there. Okay, then you take some of that You just soften it in. Bring it down. Take this one, wiggle it out. Do the same thing with this one. Take some of that and wiggle it out. You know, just give it a little bit more. Now, if this was dry enough, I could do a little bit more. I call it graffiti work when you start putting, you see certain things and you put the lines in. But see, if it's still wet, it doesn't fall into the, it doesn't stay there. It gets fuzzy. So what I do is pull some of that out, soften it out, and I can leave that in there like that. But if I do something like that, I can't just leave it one area like that. Let's do something else in here, or another something up in here, you know, and then take that and just, because it's wet in the wet, see how I can kind of pull away from it and make it softer. So what I'm saying is that in watercolor, I think it means a lot when you can be patient with the paint and let certain areas dry and then come back in with some texture. Now certainly it's going to be impossible to do every little branch and twig, you know, so to speak. But you can do some. You can do some of that in here, and it's just soften it out. Yeah, see if I wanted this edge to show up more, and to break it up a little bit. How you can make that work. You may not want to leave it that strong. So again, you can take and pull some of the color out of that and use it somewhere else. It had a little bit more blue to it. Use it somewhere else. Put some blue into it. You got to be careful though. You don't want to make everything start getting streaky. So if something needs to be sort of softened out, you break it up, and so it doesn't look quite as streaky. Streaky. I don't know if I care about that being as blue. So what we do is just soften that out, and I think I can come back with the color and hide it a little bit more. Just quiet it down. See how I can quiet things down a bit more. I like the idea though of repeating color somewhere else, you know. It kind of unifies the picture if you put the color somewhere else. See, if you got blue in there, well, if you just have one spot of blue, people say, oh, you must have made a mistake. But if you put blue, take some of that same color and put it back into here, then they'll say, oh, you're distributing or whatever. Distribute color. Okay, see, I can do a little bit of that, but you don't want to get too carried away. Something like that. You might want to show a little bit more down here, texture, whatever you might want to do with that. You want to separate something a little bit more. You take a little bit of the color, poke it in there. You know, kind of distribute the color. If this is too strong here, it might be a little bit strong. I just take your brush and just pick some of the color out, or soften it out. one here a little bit more. So you're getting to a point where, you know, it's looking okay. Now I got to fix this up. See how it's going off the deep end here. This is getting a little bit fuzzy, so I clean up that edge, make it softer in here. And now I'm going to finish this. I got to put those little bumps back, like in the photograph. So let's see if I can get them back in there. Somehow, you got one, another one over here, maybe. Got to get those back in there. And cut this in here. What I got to do now is add some contrast there. Make these little bumps a little bit darker in the hollows. Put that color back in there. And if that doesn't look right, I'm going to erase some of this up in here. Soften that up. Have it kind of fade away again up into there. Way up into here. Take that edge away. So you have something like that. You see how I brought that back in there. Erase some of this in here. Some days I have to almost take it to the top of the paper. Take it off in there. See how there's still a little bit of an edge? Just erase that in. Take that out of there. Now if I want this to show up a little bit more contrast, I could take a little bit more of the darker color, put it in here, put the wedge back in there a little bit more. And again, take that out, soften it out, pull it back inside, and then that's the way you go. Now, I'm pretty well all set with this painting, other than the fact that I haven't signed my name, okay? But it's just a matter of putting a little bit of a soft wash down through here, right through here, and up through there, just to give it a little bit more contrast. And that's about it. So I kind of still need to touch it up, but you have to sometimes let it dry before you can come back into it too much more. But that just gives you an idea how that works. Almost looks like a little figure off there. It's supposed to be a tree. Kind of break it up so more like a tree again. Okay, well thanks for being with us, and what do I normally say? Brushes up, and see you next week, okay?